when the opportunity come to move to Everton, to move to such a big club, yes, I was lucky considering how it didn't go great for me at Sunderland, and I recognise that fully. I just didn't play well enough, so I was never going to endear myself to the fans when I didn't play well enough. To get the opportunity to go to Everton and play under a manager who I knew from the age of 15, 16, um, that was, again, another blessing for me that I went to a club that I feel, I, there's so many memories from Everton. Even when I look back at my Everton career, even the bad memories from Everton, they were great memories for me personally because I was part of an institution. I was part of something that I can't even describe. I can't even tell you properly, Paul, what it means to be an Evertonian. That's my team now. That will always be my team. Um, Special club, special people, special. I got everything. Supporters, the people that work at the club, the staff, everything around Everton is remarkable. And if I look back at my career and I think look some play for some great clubs, Everton is the number one in my eyes because of what it is and what it stands for. Yeah.
And like, it's really nice to hear that as an Everton fan. But I remember thinking to that period of time, because it wasn't always like the best of times. Everton were struggling at times, and then to go from struggling and losing Wayne Rooney to finishing fourth in the Champions League spot, when people talk about breaking the top
Yeah.
four and stuff, that was a really big turning point. That season, obviously, when Tim Cahill came in, Mikel Arteta came in the second half of that season. But there was like, during that kind of period, there were some really big players, there were really big characters. I said this
Mm.
to you before. Funnily enough, we had a big kind of influx of Rangers players at Everton, and
Yeah.
we used to
You
go
can
out.
imagine I used to share the car ride with Gary Naismith, who's a big Rangers fan, and Davy Weir, who went
Hmm.
on to be Rangers captain.
Well, this is part
So
of the
you can
story.
you imagine the car ride that I used to have when I was in with those guys as a Celtic fan.
Yeah, well, so part of that story, funny. I think I've told you this on WhatsApp before, but basically we used to go over as the Irish Toffees. We used to go over once a year. You'd visit Belfield. That was the old training ground then. It's obviously Finch Farm now, but we basically you were coming out with. I think Alan Stubbs may have been in the car as well, if
No,
memory
it
serves.
would have been Steve Watson. They used to drive in with Steve Watson, David Weir, and Gary Naismith. That was like our little foursome in the car. Yeah, it was great, great car rides, great car journeys. Yeah.
Yeah, well, so you would have been coming out of the finishing training. You would have came out, and I remember I had a conversation, and I think you might have said you were a Celtic fan, which obviously makes sense. You'd already said it, and then the lads were like, "Oh, we're Rangers. Who are you?" And I was just like, I remember just saying something cheeky, like as a kid, just like, "Oh, I don't want to speak to you," or something like that. How are you, Kevin? And I just remember, so I'd say when the Irish Toffees went over, the lads would get that quite a bit, being Rangers players and stuff like that. But look, David Weir was a great servant, and even in
Yeah,
that side that finished
great
fourth.
player.
But
Yeah.
how was like David Moyes? I mean, I spoke about Wayne Rooney there, and like he's one of the best ever to play the game, in my opinion. And
Yeah.
you'd have played with him, much like Roy. I'm sure he was another player who elevated. You would have played with players like Kevin Campbell, Big Dunk. Like there was so many big characters in that Everton side. So how did you manage to fit in? And what
Mm.
was David Moyes like, considering you had a previous relationship with him?
Yeah, great character. It was a different relationship. Yeah, absolutely was. I never played under him as a manager. I knew him, as I said, he was the captain of Preston when I first broke into the. Well, actually, wasn't the team. He was player assistant manager when I first broke into the team, but he was my captain. I was on the periphery of that side, training with first team when David Moyes was captain. So he knew me from such a young age. Yeah, he did. So, but it was a different relationship. Yeah, I'd never played under him, but I knew guys that played at Preston that played under him after I'd left and said that, look, brilliant manager, yes, but he knows what he wants and he knows how to get it. And when he first went into Everton, I think he struggled at first because of the characters, those characters in there. He'd never probably experienced Duncan Ferguson, Campbell, Stubbs, all these guys that were in there.
Gaza
But
and
going back to
Ginola, I
myself,
think, as well.
Janola was there, was he? He wasn't with me, but
Yeah, no,
he
but
could have been
previously, yeah.
under Moyes. Yeah, but I tell you, from a personal point of view, I felt as though I had a really good 3 or 4 year period around that time. My last year at Sunderland was just off the back of the World Cup. I always remember Niall Quinn spoke to me again. Niall, it would have been a great mentor of mine. Niall spoke to me after that, and he said to me, off the back of Italian 90, I wanted to kick on. I remember him saying that to me. He said, "Look, this was your World Cup now. You've got to go and kick on from here." And I had a bit of a mindset like that. I'm going to go and kick on. And I probably had my best season at Sunderland with the first couple of years that was there, after with what everything that had happened there. But we got relegated. So ultimately, your personal recognition is not even going to be given to you. And I didn't want it. I wasn't even thinking that way. So off the back of that, I go to Everton, and Everton was a struggle that first year. You spoke about the position we were in. Um, we actually did comfortably enough avoid relegation in my first season at Everton, but we finished 17th. We we lost the last, I think, four
City,
games
yeah.
of the season. We were comfortably safe, but almost when we got safe, the season switched off. A little bit like that, if you know what I mean. So it's exaggerated a bit how close that we came to relegation in that season with David Moyes. I feel, because I always felt we were more than comfortable, but in losing those last 3 or 4 games of the season, it looks maybe like we only finished a point above relegation when we were done and dusted a month ahead of time. But anyway, into that following season, all these guys that you spoke about here, like another guy. I mean, okay, at first I would have messaged you around Kevin's death when Kevin passed away, but just the most remarkable person Kev was. Just as I said about the club in general, I don't know if it was Everton that made the players or the players that made the club, if you know what I mean, from that
Yeah.
that dressing room that I had. I think that you almost had to if you're going to sign for Everton now, you've got to act in a certain way. You've got to respect what's gone before you. That was almost said to you, and I certainly felt it when I went into the building. Now, whether or not these people, these characters that were in there, whether or not they felt the same way, I don't know. I can't say that. But Everton had amazing people and characters, and I said the staff that was around, not just the immediate coaching staff, the people that were around the club made Belfield. You mentioned Belfield there. The people that were around us, we had a really tight knit. Uh, like feeling to us all, but the players like Kevin, like Duncan, I mentioned before, Watto, Lee Carsley, Gravison, these players were all great characters, great people, but also knowing that they were part of something very special in playing for the club. And I felt that straight away. So when I signed in Cams was just, oh, I mean, as a player, great player, yeah, he was, and Kevin was coming towards the end of his career. I was lucky that I think I only got about maybe a year with Cams, 18 months, maybe whatever it was I got with Cams before he ended up going to West Brom. But that year, he made a big impact on me personally and how he was. So it was, I think for our team and the people that played before me, and maybe even other players that all knew Kevin when he was at Arsenal and teams like that, know how great a person Cams was. What a great guy he was. And when he passed away, the sad news when that came about a couple of years ago, I would have messaged you. We would have messaged around it, wouldn't we? Because
Yeah.
you loved Kevin Campbell as an Evertonian, but we loved him as a person. And what you saw in Kevin, you got it. He gave everything. He was. And look, played with some great people, and I know I did, but if I'm looking at people who would have played alongside and had great influence on me, just with the character that they brought, Kevin would definitely be one of them. I remember we went to um, we went to Houston that summer. It's a famous trip for us all the Everton players around that time, because it was just off the back of selling Wayne. That was the year that we actually finished fourth, and our squad had been depleted. We'd had to sell Wayne. We weren't able to bring in 3 or 4 players like David Moyes wanted.
It
The
just
the the
Marcus
whole
Bent and
structure
Tim
at the
Cahill
club.
came in. That was it, I think.
Yeah, we signed Benty. We signed Benty to replace Wayne, which on the face of it, people probably laughed a little bit. But what a signing that was for what 300,000 or 400,000, whatever Benty cost for us. And Tim, obviously, what a signing Tim was coming in. But I always remember the Houston trip. We went away for that pre-season, and we flew um, to Houston from Manchester. I think we played Burnley pre-season, and Burnley. annihilated us. I think we got beat 1 or 2. It wasn't an annihilation in terms of the result, but the performance, they annihilated us. And Moyes was under pressure. David Moyes was under so much pressure that people were calling for him to go because we had only finished 17th the season before. We'd sold Wayne Rooney. Everyone wanted change. Everyone was calling for Bill Kenwright to leave and things like that. And David Moyes, we went to that on that Houston trip, and we came together. And I flew. I sat beside Kevin on that trip, and I just had my daughter. My daughter Elsie was born, and she had Down syndrome when she was born. And this is one of the reasons probably why Everton means so much to me, because when I went through, personal trauma at that time, and everything, that the unknown. I had Lee Carsley, who's my best mate. Lee has a son with Downs. Lee was there for me, and just going back to that Houston trip. Sorry, but we got on the plane and he handed me a DVD. It was the days of the old portable DVDs. I didn't have one with me, but he gave me his portable DVD player, Kev, to watch a movie, and the movie was called Radio. I don't know if anyone's seen the movie by Radio, but it's a guy who has special needs in the movie, played by Cuba Gooding Jr., and he's part of an American football team, and he's kind of like the mascot. He's the guy that brings the drinks out for them. I can't really remember the gist of the movie, but I watched the movie anyway. And Elsie was only about 2 months old at that time, 2 or 3 months old, because she was born in March, so it would have been like what, 4 months or whatever. It was in June, and Cam's handed me the movie because he didn't say anything. He said, "Watch this movie, have a look at it." And obviously, I was probably in a lot of pain at the time because I didn't know what I was in the unknown in many respects. And players weren't really talking to me because we're right at the end of that season. As I said, we'd finished really poorly at Everton. We came back to the new season, and I was probably in a different headspace to a lot of people. And Cam's just handed me the DVD player and the movie, and I watched it, and I was in tears watching the movie. I'm watching the movie. Kev, like, kind of just like, he held me hand in a way where he just knew probably what I needed. There was nothing said, nothing really said. And that was from a lot of my teammates, maybe apart from Lee, who I confided in an awful lot around that time. But Kevin just sat with me on the plane, as I said, and handed me the movie, and I was in tears watching this movie. And we didn't say, as I said, we didn't say an awful lot, but it was a really emotional time for me. And obviously, Kevin recognized what I needed. And that season, just in general, I knew the teammates that I had around me. I knew the club that I joined, and I'd been at Everton for a year at that time, and I knew that I was at a special club. But that summer, when we went to Houston, around the negativity that was around the club, around the team, was just, it was magical. It was magical. It was a magic season, a um magic team, and just magic people that I was around. And I'm I feel so honored that I was part of that team, and those people that were around me. And it's probably those little memories that I have, and I say to you, that's why Everton will always be my team. It'll never change because of that trip to Houston that we had. That it was a real coming together, and being around people like Kevin, who were very special teammates at that time for me. Yeah,
Yeah, again, I go back to like huge characters, and then you mentioned Lee Carsley, and I'm gonna talk about that Derby goal, and obviously what a game. I mean, we had some big
mm.
results that year. I have to be careful saying we on this, because it's
Yeah,
predominantly
yeah,
Irish, but beating Man United 1-0 Duncan Ferguson, but then obviously beating Liverpool in a derby, which it'd been
yeah,
a while since Everton had done that, and obviously that's such a big kind of moment. But they were kind of season defining games, they were, and I'm sure that for you, seeing Lee Carsley getting his flowers at that point must have been
yeah.
nice for you as well as a friend of his.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was like I'd scored that goal in that Merseyside derby. That's the way that I felt about Lee. That's what Lee means to me. So, look, if I'd have scored it, I would have actually. I prefer Lee to have scored it than myself, and that's the truth. There's no better man that I would feel that would be deserved of that accolade, of that goal, and what it meant to us that season as well, and the momentum that we got off the back of it. You mentioned the Man United game, probably the single best atmosphere I've probably ever played at club level at Goodison that night when we beat Man United. That Merseyside derby was another one. It's special, but the night games at Goodison, you probably would have been over to a few yourself, Paul.
Yeah.
The big nights at Goodison were just off the charts, off the charts. And that Man United game when Duncan scored that night was, oh wow, just incredible. So there was a lot of moments in that season, yeah, that we had big nights, big moments, big games that we were able to get over the line, I suppose, and get the job done on some big nights and some big days. But they were probably the two highlights, probably two of the highlights of my career. That Man United win, just because that was the almost one that got us into the Champions League or got us that fourth spot, and that Merseyside derby win at Goodison that year, yeah. And that Merseyside derby win was extra special because our Christmas party was that night and the following day. So if we hadn't have won that game, David Moyes probably wouldn't have allowed us to go on the Christmas party.
Yeah, I'm sure he was leading the charge at that point with the win.
Yeah, something like that. Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like, just because it's obviously been, a hard watch the last number of years, both Ireland and Everton. But it must be nice to kind of see David
Yeah.
Moyes coming back there now.
Yeah.
Maybe it probably brings back memories for you.
It does bring back a lot of memories. I was delighted when he took the job again. I think there was probably a few Evertonians that were against it. There were, there was probably equal measure that some that were for it and some that were against it. But just what that club meant to him personally, and I'd spoken to him a lot about playing for Everton and what it means to play for that club and the people that as I said before. I know it came from a lot of the players, but David Moyes was another one that drove that with me personally. And I would have had a lot of individual time with David. I think he knew that he could maybe trust me a little bit and that was probably going back to our history together. And those conversations that we would have had would have been along the lines of, You're at Everton now. This is special. This is the memories that you'll take for the rest of your life." And he was right at the time when he was saying it. So I was so glad he was back in there because of his recognition and knowing what that club actually is and what it means. So I'm I'm optimistic about where the team can go. I'm looking forward to watching Everton in the next few years, and I've liked watching them since David's gone back in. I have to say that most of the time for me, it's kind of trying to watch matches here and there around the kids running around. But I love watching them. To see them move from Goodison. I was gutted I couldn't even get back last season. I would have loved to have gone back, particularly to that last game of the season, but it wasn't to be. I want to get to the new stadium at some stage across the course of the next season, but we'll see if I can or I can't. I just like watching them from afar. And as I said, they're always my team. And if I talk to anybody, even over here in Canada, about football and you get talking around it, they'll speak about Everton invariably. So it's great that he's in there anyway. And I just hope that there's special times ahead, and I'm sure there will be if David's there, because I think that they're building something nicely right now.
Yeah, well, you just on you obviously with Everton. I mean, you would have finished fourth, the Champions League, all that sort of thing. Then you probably see
Yeah,
an elevation of players coming in as well. In terms of, I think Phil Neville,
yeah,
there was a few that came in that season. Tim Howard might have came in as well. I think that season,
yeah.
that
That's right.
summer. But
Yeah,
for you, obviously, we know how the game against Villarreal went, and we all have our opinions on that. As frustrating as
yeah,
it was, but you must have been looking at that going, this was a really special period for Everton and you again.
yeah.
World Cup, you play with Everton,
Well, yeah,
highest ever finish in
yeah,
the Premier League so far.
yeah. That's right. That's right. Highest ever Premier League finish was nice to be part of that. Yeah, and I remember It was funny because I always remember Liverpool winning the Champions League that season. I remember it because we'd met up with the Irish team and we'd finished fourth. And in those days, you didn't automatically get into the Champions League the following season, even if you won it. As everybody knows, famously, the law or the rule was changed because Liverpool actually won the Champions League that year. So Liverpool weren't in the Champions League. We'd finished ahead of them, and then Liverpool ended up, you know, coincidentally getting into the Champions League. So we had one over on Liverpool, and then they managed to get one way or another get back into the Champions League again the following season. But I remember that because we met up and Brian Kerr was manager, and I don't even know the games we had that summer. Kenny would have been captain, but we went out had a drink watching that game, and we were watching the Champions League final. We were watching it primarily because Stephen Finnan was part of our squad, and he was obviously playing in the Champions League final. So we were all watching it, and Liverpool 3-0 down, and I was getting, I won't say who it was, but I was getting texts from a friend of mine, an Evertonian, and he was like, "Go on, get in 1-0, 2-0, 0-0." And he said to me, even his last text, he went, "If any team could come back, it'll be Liverpool. They're the jammiest team ever." That's what he said. I always remember the text, what he said in that match at half time. And I, like everyone, was thinking game over. There was no chance that was going to happen. And we know what happened afterwards. And he messaged me back immediately after the game, told you. Unbelievable. He was like, all the Evertonians were gutted that they managed to get their moment and their glory the same season that we managed to top them in the league, because it hadn't happened too often. So, I always remember that for that reason, actually. But I just think, yeah, that period of time though playing for Everton was great. The Villarreal game, we got the rough end of the stick, didn't we? We got a tough draw. Villarreal La Liga side that had just finished out the side the Champions League spot themselves, that had some amazing players. They were a brilliant team, and whatever anyone thinks, yeah, with that Duncan Ferguson goal. Um, it was a bad night for us. Yeah, it was a bad night, and it was a bit of a disaster for us because I would have loved to have played in the Champions League that season. Yeah.